Betsy Ross and Thomas Paine in the ass of the globalists here for the American Intelligence Media. Well, Tyler and Douglas Gabriel here with Michael McKibben. Hi, Michael.
Hello, good morning.
Well, we watched at least part of the debates because I know a few of us fell asleep. They were so boring last night. I think this was the Junior League, and maybe tonight on Wednesday, which is the 31st of July, we'll have the Senior League. What did you make out of it, Thomas?
Well, that's a good idea. I was awake, and I was, at first I approached it as, a comedy night, but then it wasn't funny. And then it was like pathetic. And then I realized that these are governors and representatives and all these people, and they can't put a sentence together, and they don't have a single thought. And I'm changing the name from demon rats to demon. They're demob rats. They're a mob. All they said was, okay, the mob who wants free education and your education debt written off, I'm giving it to you. The mob who wants this entitlement, the mob who wants that, all it was a giveaway. And what we saw was the most pathetic attempt for the Democrats to provide some leadership, which demonstrated they don't have one speck of it available anywhere in the entire Democrat Party.
I disagree. You don't change their name because they are a pack of rats. They are still demons. They are demon rats. That's the best name for them. Michael, what did you make out of it? Because you didn't fall asleep like I did.
Full disclosure, I probably did. The frightening thing for me, as you know, in my past work, I worked with Soviet dissidents and people in the Soviet Union, and saw what a socialist society, what a socialist economy can do to a society. And what I heard in every one of their talking points was each one was giving away something to a group of people who were going to get it for free. And this idea that you can get anything for free economically is an extremely destructive idea, but it seems to have perennial attraction to a group of people. And it seems like all those people were pandering to certain polls that said, if I say this particular thing and promise this to that particular group, they will vote for me. Forget the fact that what they're proposing is illogical. And so the idea of a giveaway is the idea of a nanny state, is the idea of what the Soviet Union ended up being, in that everything was coming from the government, from a central planned economy out of Moscow. And the idea that these people, they would attract bright people to Moscow and then distribute these resources all over the country, and would manage everything down to when brooms are delivered by train to Melitopol in the Ukraine. I mean, and it didn't work. The system failed on its own merits or lack thereof. And so what's frightening here is that these people are being put out as credible candidates for President of the United States. God help us if any of those people was put in charge, because what we know would happen is they would not be in charge. It would be whoever their handlers are. So it would be more of this secret government that we're trying to get away from.
Well, I think it's a three-ring circus. We have, in one ring, we have the clown Nadler, who just looking at him should make you laugh, except that he takes himself seriously.
Well, wait a minute. He's not running for president. So why are we talking about Nadler?
Because the Democrats are going to lose the House, and we're talking about the prediction of what happens in 2020, and that's going to be what we already said. There's already been the major events. We called them out when they happened, where Trump has already won the election. The Mueller report being a dud. That was it.
How come they didn't talk about the Mueller report last night? How come they didn't talk about Russia collusion?
You're so funny.
Why are they still talking about reparations? In fact, that reparation number is going up, and that is just pandering to blacks in America by basically saying you'll get paid off. But we all know what will happen. the money will go into some fund. It'll be managed by a bunch of NGOs and whatever, and the people on the ground would never see it, even if it were to be paid. And what is Marianne Williamson doing? Calling out for reparations. $500 billion. Where is she going to get the money? And when I hear that, I go, I hope they ask that question on Wednesday night to Miss Kamala Harris, who we know and our research has found her family was not only slave owners. Her great-grandfather was one of the biggest slave traders in this hemisphere. Huge. Not only blacks, Creoles, but Irish. The man was a monster. And then, Michael, fill in a little bit about Kamala's father and grandfather, because you've done some more research. Your team has done some more research on that.
Well, her father was clearly a proponent of the United Nations agenda. Because he was an economics professor at Stanford, and it's very clear that he inherited a lot of influence in Jamaica because he has continued to advise the prime ministers of Jamaica ever since they received home rule from England in 1962.
There's that dirty word again, England.
Yes. Jamaica, it's pretty clear, Jamaica has never left the British Empire, and her father was definitely a player in the Lord Mark Malloch Brown UN agenda. And as we go back in time he's the one that disclosed to us that Hamilton Brown was one of his relatives who was one of the big enslavers in Jamaica. So we take that on strong authority. But then we look at what Hamilton Brown did, and we see we have firsthand accounts of the treatment of slaves of various origins, like you say. He really didn't care whether he had black, white, brown slaves. He had them all.
Well, it was all about human trafficking. That's what we call slavery today.
Right.
And so when Marianne Williamson calls for reparations, she needs to look over to Kamala Harris and tell her to get her checkbook open.
Well, I think I'm going to get in that list since I have Irish heritage. So it could have been they enslaved some of my ancestors. So where does this logic come that it's only black slaves that we should be dealing with if we're going to talk about reparation? So clearly the whole reparations idea is just another way to shift taxes. It's another form of carbon tax, like Douglas said.
Reparations is nonsense when we have, they'll admit 500,000 homeless who are really economic slaves. They are the result, the throwaway, the fodder of our economic slavery system. And so reparations, like you say, there's never been a race, Irish, I'm part Irish, I want my reparations, I guess. There's never been a race that hasn't been enslaved, and there's never been a race that didn't enslave. It's no such thing. So reparations, that's just stupid. Marianne Williamson is the white elephant in the room. Someone brought her in as a giveaway gift, and somehow she got on the stage.
How did we get a round number of 500 billion? Where'd that round number come from?
Of homeless?
No, of reparations.
Because the last person asked for 300 and the one before 200, so they're upping it.
You know, whenever you see round numbers in economics, you know it's made up.
And Bernie will come out with 600. I mean, they just keep upping it. But let's just go back to Marianne Williamson, because she is thrown in there. Remember folks, she comes from Detroit, so all that hooping and hollering you saw in the audience last night was from her Detroit sycophants. But what Marianne is maybe not aware of is that Douglas Gabriel and John Barnwell hung out with that Marianne Williamson crowd back in Detroit in the day, and we're not ready yet to tell her real backstory. But if she ever gets traction, we have a backstory on Miss Marianne Williamson.
I was a counselor for her for the years that she was in at the Unity Temple right in Metro Detroit, and so I know her very, very, very well. And I know her teacher, who the only real teacher she had, Manly P. Hall, and I've also studied at the same places that she studied. And really, she's built her whole life upon the word love. But she's not a person who actually has demonstrated that word love. So you can talk all you want, and you can get bestseller books, just like Big Mike supposedly has a bestseller book, but there may not be any content in that book, and you certainly may not be living it in your lives. So let's look at Joe Biden, who is, of course, he's a white racist. He's a white supremacist, if there ever was one. And, he was patting Obama on the back saying, finally, we got a good-looking black man who has a nice smile that we can manipulate right into high politics. I mean, here's a guy, it's disgusting. And then Kamala Harris, a non-black, I mean, mixed? No, not even that. Jamaican, probably. Call it Creole. I don't know what you want to call her. But she is not what she says. She is an anchor baby, and Trump is writing, supposedly, the new conspiracy is that Trump is going to write an executive order eliminating the concept of anchor babies, because there never was any provision for anchor babies. That would eliminate Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris, let's look at that, or let's look at anybody who is coming out of California. As I said, 500,000 homeless in California right now in just 3 cities. We have a new slavery system going on. And this is the state that is demanding that illegal aliens have more rights than citizens. And so the people who are running for office from the Demon Rat Party, what are they saying? Illegal aliens have more rights than citizens. They can murder and be set free. Drug trafficking is good. Human trafficking is good. Raping all the children who come to the border, which is just about the case. Almost all of them are either raped, or they're finding out through DNA testing that almost all the DNA testing they do prove that those children are human trafficked. Those aren't their parents. And then the right, the Mexican right to come to America, earn money, and send the remittance back to Mexico. Oh, well, take a look at what's happening in Minnesota, in Ilhan Omar's district, and the remittances going back to Somalia. What we're doing is we're feeding terrorism. That's what we're doing. And open borders for the Democrats, for the Demon Rats, is sheer anarchy. So the 3-ring circus goes on. It is just beautiful. I don't know. Do we look at the freak clown that scares everybody, Adam Schiff? Looking at him scares me. I mean, he is worse than those scary clowns, okay? Nadler, what do we got? Tweedledee? Tweedledum? I'm not sure. I think we have some kind of freak alien in that guy. He still believes the myth and is trying to keep the myth of impeachment alive. Utterly a joke. Elijah Cummings was smart enough to back out and not do a testimony of Mueller before his committee. And because then his job was still to bash Trump, he started bashing Trump, and then Trump said, look, you and the Democrats, you and the Demon Rats are basically your rat raisers. You are rat mongers. Look at the rats in California that have become so big they're as big as a large raccoon or a dog. A special form of rat has actually been bred by the grotesque socialism, which is dipping into a horrible form of Soviet communism, more or less, in California. And then you look at Baltimore. Who was the head of Baltimore? That would have been Pelosi's dad, who was a big mafia crime boss as Hillary's dad in Chicago. So Pelosi, right now, brought the Baltimore mob to D.C. Hillary brought the Chicago mob to D.C. And what we have up there on the stage are all that's left, because Hillary was assumed to be the queen of what we are now finding was the British plan to make sure that Canada reunited with America and we went back to being a Commonwealth of England.
Okay, folks, like we've always been saying, what we're fighting is an information war. It started, with Cecil Rhodes way back when all this propaganda was spewed out over the wires to us, and it's only intensified. So you have to be very careful what you're watching, what you're reading in the mainstream media. If you have to ask your question, who is paying the person who's reporting to you? And then look at the agenda. See what they're not telling you as much as the lies that they tell you. Now, We've got these guys, these demon rats in a corner because our information warriors are more fierce. You should see our memes. They're killers, Mike. Have you seen them?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, because what
Fantastic.
they do, they wake people up as to what the truth is. Now, their party and their constituents are not as awake. They're asleep, and that's where they want to keep them, brainwashed and sleepwalking. In the meantime, AIM Truth Warriors, we continue to march on to find even more information that will bring it all down. And we have to bring this all down worldwide. And it's so great to see people from all over the world who are getting the big picture. Now, Michael is sitting here with a document that was mailed to him by one of our truth warriors. What's her first name? The one that I hung up on the other day because I thought she was a mainstream reporter. You know who you are, and thank you, and I'm so hard, but I'm very hard on people who call me out of the blue, and I don't know that they're calling. But Michael, you have this record, and I know you're not ready to report on it right now, but why do you think our friend was prompted to mail this to you?
Well, she's been listening to a lot of the broadcasts where we've been uncovering various elements of the story and the origins of the wireless and propaganda development out of the UK in 1917 timeframe, and then the establishment of RCA and the early genesis of propaganda in Britain. And then we moved forward to 1946, where we saw the fusion of American and British intelligence in the Five Eyes on March 5th of 1946. And we saw that Roosevelt issued a decree stealing over 50,000 worldwide patents and giving them to American corporations in 1942. So we've got these pieces and parts, and we saw how the Cecil Rhodes vision of this great Anglo-American alliance was still driving it. And now we've got a document here that absolutely nails what we saw. And it's a congressional record.
It's more than that. Who took the time and effort to read this into the congressional record back in, was it 1946?
It was the Honorable J. Thorkelson of Montana in the House of Representatives.
And what was the date on that?
It was August 19th of 1940.
Oh, 1940. Okay,
Right.
So someone, a brave truth warrior, said, I at least have to make an official record of this. And
Correct.
what we're finding is just blowing us away because it is further confirming the research that we've already found, which already has evidence. It's like...
Here's a good summary. Here, let me read
Okay.
you one short paragraph.
Sure.
It's a summary of this, what he's presenting. And he gives names, places, dates, companies. It's an unbelievable list. He says in this one paragraph, Cecil Rhodes's dream of empire found expression in his legacy providing for the education of American youths in England. Rhodes hoped that the process of time would gradually prove an influence in changing the history of the United States as it is written and studied in America to the way England teaches it in her colleges and desires that it should be taught in America in order to do justice to England. Quote.
There you go.
There it is. This is unbelievable.
It's the propaganda that they have been using since 1913 when they infiltrated us completely.
And basically, folks here in America, when you studied history in school, you studied revisionist history because the books and the publishers all bow to these globalists.
Toynbee, Will Durant, R.L. Durant, all the different historians were actually a project of British propaganda to make sure that the British were treated properly. Well, here's the deal. They've never been our friend, and they never will be our friend.
Except for the patriots in Britain who were fighting the same fight that Americans were fighting back in 1776, where we thought we won because the history books told us, but we haven't.
This guy specifically said, and he makes the point, because he's arguing against going to war with Germany. And he's saying this entire group of people that he identifies in the Pilgrim Society in both the UK and the US are driving for war. They're against peace. And in fact, it says it in here specifically. And he's saying, but folks, the people that we're going to send to war are the people in our country and in Britain who have no voice. And yet we're going to decide in our benevolent point of view that we need to send our young men and women to war?
And
to
it
die?
doesn't stop there. It is every war that we have fought in the modern times
Right.
have been sending our men and women to become blood fodders to
Right.
run their military-industrial complex.
That's his point here.
And this underscores the fact that, as you just got through saying, Betsy, that the propaganda and the mainstream media and the media has to be able to control the narrative for war to continue. So what do we have here? Hillary, in 2016, had she come to power, we would be in a number of wars right now. We've already pointed that out. It's actually in the intelligence community's report. But what we see now coming in 2020, if any of those people on stage for the Demon Rats come to power, it goes right back to the same old globalist nonsense. We go back into the climate accord, back into every war that Britain sets us up with false intelligence, whatever. We would go back to the same old handlers that we've had. Now, I like to look at this election as it's already over. And I believe that we will not only win the presidency again, but MAGA candidates will win the House and will keep the Senate. Why do I say that? Because they have already overplayed their game. Long before the election comes, they've already played, as they did in 2016, they overplayed their attempt with October surprises, or basically mainstream media smears, which in the old days used to work. One mainstream media smear could knock a candidate out.
Right.
Mitt Romney had one little bad media blurb, and boom, he was gone.
They already decided to take him out and let the other team win.
Precisely.
And Mitt is such a wishy-washy globalist. He does anything. Bend over, take it like a Romney. And by the way, let me say, do not send your 2020 campaign donations to the RNC. It's filled with rats. Those are Republicans against Trump, rhinos, and Romneys. What you want to do for this 2020 cycle is to send your donations directly to the DonaldJTrump.com campaign or to the MAGA candidate of your choice. We must starve out these rats, rhinos, and Romneys in the RNC so we can take it over and make it totally MAGA.
We've already seen the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee completely corrupt. They do whatever they want. And if they take your money, they have no obligation to you whatsoever. We've seen that in the courts with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. But what we have in the 2020 election is the 2016 election is not over. The George Soros attempt at a purple revolution here in America to overthrow the election of Donald Trump, first off, to meddle so he wouldn't get elected. Second off, to overthrow it after he's been elected with all this false attack, this coup d'etat. What is going on? It became revealed. And now that it's revealed, we get to see in retrospect that 2016, what it really was. And we've revealed a lot of that to you. And what has happened? Now they have to work even harder. So now they've exposed themselves even more. They've sent the ex-Deputy Prime Minister of England to come control Facebook. They sent Sheryl Sandberg back in there to control Facebook because Facebook manipulated the elections. We now have experts who say millions of people were manipulated by Facebook and the algorithms in Google. But we also are seeing all kinds of election changes right now. We hear Trump saying paper ballots, e-verification. 5 million people have been taken off of the rolls in California so that they can't do ballot harvesting so easily. We're beginning to see some changes, but what I love is the 4 horsewomen of the apocalypse and the Green New Deal, and now the new Green Deal, supported by Kamala Harris again, is just beautiful because that's their platform. They have nothing else. Their anti-Trumpism turned into sheer insanity. No one could possibly ever give a logical explanation why the planks of the new Green Deal could ever work in the physical real world, because it can't. And then you got Al Green put forth his 3rd impeachment request. The man who should go to jail for his sexual assaults on Capitol Hill, who we had to pay millions of dollars in settlements for that man. He is attacking Trump for the 3rd time with his impeachment. Of course, it didn't go through. The impeachment deal is over. And because of that, we have to now underscore the fact that Trump has won 2020 through that also. Not only the dud of the Mueller investigation, but now the dud of the impeachment. almost guarantees it.
And I know what I'm getting ready to say is like totally outrageous. May I say it? Totally outrageous.
You're always
okay.
so
okay.
unoutrageous.
Look, we've already shown you, and we're going to even show you more proof before 2024, that the United States, as it is right now, has not been controlled by us. It's being controlled by foreign influence. And we're really running their government. We're not running our government. And in their government, we, the people, elected Donald Trump. And so that's great. So he's finishing out the term of the illegal, illicit government. When we have won the American Revolution, I say we go to the polls and we elect a president now with us having regained the United States of America and run Trump again. I'm not talking about extending terms like FDR, but I'm saying he is the president of their rogue government right now. We don't have control over it. So I keep throwing that out. Maybe some fancy lawyer will work that through the process.
Very interesting. So here's another. You talk about the propaganda. In this, he identifies the occurrence in about 1914 where the British signed a monopoly contract with Marconi to develop wireless transmission stations all over the world that would communicate with the British Admiralty and all the steamships, and basically would become the new embassies of Britain. And in the process of the Parliament actually did not have control of that contract. That was done secretly by the people that were involved with the British war cabinets. And they cut all these deals between Marconi and the post office in Britain. And finally several members of Parliament caught wind of these secret deals, and insisted that Parliament have a debate on the subject. Well, what they discovered was that Lloyd George and a Rufus Isaacs were two members of Parliament at the time. Lloyd George later became Prime Minister, who knew about this secret contract with Marconi, and Rufus's brother in America bought stock for Lloyd George and for Rufus Isaac in Marconi USA, which was a subsidiary of Marconi Britain. And so that became known as the Marconi stock scandal. Well, there's another interesting point which I had not realized, is that Rufus's brother was the power behind the British Broadcasting Company, the BBC. So there we have, in all of these machinations to control the messages that the world hears and to control the world's behavior, a control over the wireless distribution of information worldwide.
People are going to want to read this document, so I'm going to put up the PDF version, and then as soon as your team goes back to make it a searchable document, I'll replace it with that. And that's really good because folks need to know this. But there was something that you were saying last night. I thought, well, this is so interesting. Is it this document that really talks about the government, this new government starting, the British new government in the United States in 1913? Where did we hear that? Douglas, do you?
Right.
There's references in there, and this is the whole point that you're making so well. Before World War I and before World War II, Americans were propagandized by Britain to become their military arm to squish the German imperialistic, beautiful Second Reich, which basically said that the Aryans were the only true race. Well, the British got wind of that, and they said, well, let's just say the English are the only true race. And so they became a racist, imperialistic monarchy.
Right. They actually refer to the Anglo-American race many times in this document.
But 1913 is a trigger date for everything, for the Federal Reserve. So what was going on there? This is how they infiltrated us.
The bankers, the warlords, the what they call them, the robber barons. They were consolidating power.
Woodrow Wilson, yes. He put all the robber baron lawyers on the inquiry,
right,
which later became the Council on Foreign Relations.
So we were taken over
yes,
at that moment in time. But they didn't let us know. They kept the history books written the way they wanted us to perceive
right,
history. And they've kept up their fake news propaganda until the day where we had enough and we had to speak up. Thank goodness you invaded scalable media to get our voice out.
They didn't and the reason
is like how we met was actually because of a listener who listens in from New Zealand. Thank you very much, David, who then sent you a video where you said you listened, heard Betsy talk about leader technologies. You're going, oh, finally somebody's talking about my company.
Right.
And then we're able
That's
to
right.
move, but we can't move and make changes unless we have patriots like you folks out here that continue to push the narrative forward, and you're educating and enlightening your audience in the best way you know how to do, and in the best way they can receive that information.
Well, here's what we've learned in the process since then in working together, that one of the things our team has been focused on is obtaining indictable evidence. In other words, evidence you can use in a court, not just articles in some...
Oh, you mean not like the Mueller report where they refer to mainstream media articles as their proof?
Right. Or what we see now is the propaganda machine is quoting themselves. So they create 3 or 4 different outlets. They write propaganda articles on one and then quote it in the other. And then eventually they're hoping people will get lost as to where the source of that real information is. So what we've been doing is looking for real information, like this congressional record, or like a court document, or like an affidavit, or things you can use in court. And so what we're learning, and I think this is sharing some observation, is that when these patriots that are listening to this broadcast take that data and share that becomes like a block of concrete that can't be moved because it's true. And what we've learned is that these, as you call them, truth bombs, destroy 1,000 lies, maybe 10,000 lies.
It would take a civil engineer to help us construct truth that will last all time.
That's right. And so what we see still, we're still putting the foundation together and providing these foundation stones. So what we encourage everyone to do is whenever you see these documents, our team tries most of the time to make them PDFs, which they can download and save separately and then rebroadcast other places. Because what's happened in the internet world for a long time, we saw it on the web, we saw it on a browser, and we thought it was permanent. But I think most people can see it now. No, that information can change anytime, any day. So what the bad guys have learned is they can put out an article, and then if something in that article is something that they find embarrassing later on, they'll just go back onto the web and change the words, and then the next time you go to that article, that information's gone. But if it's in a PDF form that's saved in advance and dated, it's much more difficult to rewrite history if you actually have the PDF. So that's what we encourage everybody to do, is rebroadcast these PDF the items that we show as evidence.
And what you're pointing at is that same old story since 1910. Steal Tesla's technology, call it Marconi, take it to Britain, and use it to manipulate.
Or, in modern times, steal leader technology, call it Facebook, and move on.
And manipulate for what purpose? Elections.
Yeah.
Manipulate for what purpose? Starting wars. These are bankers who are supporting this, and hedge fund managers now. Anyone, asset management, anybody who's got all these funds that they don't pay any taxes on. And that would mean our enemies are the war actors of Facebook, Google, Amazon, the ones who pay no taxes and actually they're not even American. We have to consider them enemies, and if you look close, they are inside of our government, but they're also owned by who? The same old people who own
a good example is go to any government site now and look what you're confronted with. You're confronted with Facebook icons, YouTube icons, Instagram. Every site, every congressman, every senator, every agency is now inundated and buried in Facebook and social media links. Well, one of the things that does is that allows those sites then to track all of the information about the people that are going to those sites. So that all becomes useful information for later manipulation.
But you have a solution to this. What is your solution?
Well, I think that if we're talking about reforming the way the social world works, what we've got to do is stop the mass surveillance, and then part of the solution, in addition to stopping the mass surveillance, is take the management of the certificate authorities, which are the digital keys that are exchanged when people browse, change the management of that whole system and take it away from these power groups that are now manipulating us.
Yes, because this three-ring circus is also about what? Silicon Valley's manipulation of voters. And we know that they manipulate us for commercial purposes. We know they manipulate us for military purposes, for anti-terrorism purposes, and all the other excuses they use. But the reality is, it's the same old story. It's a form of racist imperialism where those in power want to make sure that they can control and dominate the others. And when it gets out of control, then we need to have a war, not only to make money from both sides, because that's what the international money changers do, but it's also to keep things in chaos so that then you can move in the substructure like the U.S. Federal Reserve or the Internal Revenue Service or the Social Security system
or the Senior Executive Service,
the SES, and all these other systems that become a mimic of British bureaucracy that is a mimic of Vatican bureaucracy, which has been around for a long, long time. So when we are saying that we're looking at a document from 1940 that is so apropos to our time right now, that is absolutely the truth. It's the same exact battle. It's an information war so that whoever has the best intelligence pushes it up to the people in power. The people in power don't even know where the intelligence comes from, and they don't know if it's true. So Trump stopped listening to his intelligence group. And so don't listen to the mainstream media. It is basically corporate intelligence. And when we saw it the other day, already, not in October, but already in advance, saying that Joe Biden can beat Trump by 10 to 15 points. That's insanity. And that was Fox News, a poll on Fox News. Creepy Joe, the segregationist, the racist, white supremacist, who, don't even get me started on Creepy Joe.
Or you could go with Kamala Harris, the human trafficking family dynasty. You know, I mean, who do you go with? Or Marianne Williamson. I like her idea better. We'll just pray over crystals. Because, you know, that's got some substance to it.
Oh, yes. Or Elizabeth Warren saying she's not going to use first strike capacity ever so that we can be blown up by the time she reacts. You know, she is a screeching, horrible, old, awful person who makes no sense whatsoever. If you tried to do the math of Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or any of the rest of the demon rats, your head will explode because they all tell you that there's this 1% at the top and they're going to take all their money the first year. Well, guess what? They won't be there the second year. Where are they going to get the money the second year? Because they will have taken it all the first year. It's so stupid. So we're looking at a three-ring circus. We are looking at the extinction event of the Demon Rat Party. We're looking at the mob boss Pelosi having nowhere to turn. Schumer hasn't said a word. Obama's hiding. When it comes down to it, they don't have a single speck of leadership, and don't listen to any polls. Listen to the odds makers in Las Vegas, who will tell you none of them even have a single-digit chance against winning against Trump. So we already know what's going to happen. Now, what we're going to also predict is in his second term, oh my, he's going to end the World Bank. He's going to end the World Trade Organization, end all funding of the United Nations. He's going to basically freeze, seize, and take back our money from the U.S. Federal Reserve and let them go bankrupt, okay? He is going to restructure our entire economy. Because why? He's already shown that with just the ideas he had from the top of his head, that he'd been percolating for years, what he could do with our economy, with trade, with unemployment, with tariffs, with putting a border on our southern wall, putting a wall on our southern border for the first time. All presidents have said they would do it, none have. Basically demanding respect from other countries instead of being basically robbed and vampirized by the globalists who are a pack of wolves, just like the demon rats. So what we're seeing is an extinction event for the Democrat Party and the rise of a new party. Call it MAGA, I like to call it the Triumph Party. Call it whatever you want. What Betsy just suggested, that he goes to a third term because in the whole first term he was actually fighting George Soros and the evil SES and Robert Mueller. I love that idea.
Well, it wasn't our government. It was taken over in 1913. We got to get rid of the IRS, the Federal Reserve, the Senior Executive Service, all the things that you mentioned, because it's part of the rogue government.
Absolutely. So let's make sure we vote in MAGA candidates and get rid of the rogue government. And remember, the Uniparty was one party before Republicans and Democrats. Now there's the MAGA party, which is a non-uniparty. And that's what we're going for. So please.
By the way, there is a legal concept called adverse domination.
Yeah.
Which basically says if the people you would go to for your solution legally are a part of the crime, then essentially your term never started for that crime. So the clock on what do they call it?
Well, just like you went through the process of getting your intellectual property, your trade secrets, a patent. You went to the U.S. Patent Office, Trademark and Patent Office, like a lot of creators and entrepreneurs do. You didn't know that was the enemy.
Correct.
They stole your stuff. They weaponized it against the American people, and we're battling this. I'm sorry, America, this is a big red pill, but I am so excited to see Trump take his Twitter and beat the you-know-what out of people with his information. I heard him say the other day that if you're going to look at a situation, he was talking about Iran, you have to look at 100 years of a country. And this is so true. This is what we're finding out, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah,
so in that condition that you just named, would you call that
adverse domination?
We could make a case that Trump is really finishing out their rogue government.
Right. Yes.
And once we put them down, be the victors. It's okay to be the victors. It's okay to win a war.
Yeah.
Then we can move forward.
Yeah. In order to win this war, we have to define it properly. And that's what's going on right now. We're finally identifying who the real enemies are of our republic. And it appears that the people that have been running our government and our commerce have been a part of this Pilgrim Society League for 100 years. I mean, these are all promoters of the League of Nations, which became the United Nations. And so it's clear that these people have been attempting to take down what was the constitutional concept of our republic. And in so doing, since these were the powers that be, this idea that there's nobody that anybody could appeal to, that's adverse domination. So therefore, the statute of limitations doesn't stop on claims that you would make against these people. That's the concept here.
So perhaps Trump wants to go back 100 years to prosecute the Brits for what it is that they have been doing for those 100 years,
yes,
which is a continuous attack, assault, both with information, disinformation, with propaganda, with getting us into wars by false intelligence, and so on and so forth. So what we're seeing here is perhaps not only an extinction event for the demon rats, but it might be the end of what we used to call British loyalists, who have now become globalist loyalists, which is hard to say, by the way. But when you say Britain, there's the globalists there, and those aren't the English people. They're the people who believed that the United Nations was going to take over the world and put a carbon tax on everything you do, including the shoes you wear.
No, Rhodes has identified corporatism as the new empire. And these British elites would be the ones running it along with their cousins in America. That was his concept. And so that's not the British Empire any longer even.
Precisely. And the big debate was, shall it just be English-speaking people? Shall it be Anglophiles? Shall it be the Anglo-American Alliance? Or shall it just be Britons?
Well, they were including Germans in the early days. That changed.
Well, we need to be like the Scots.
No, what we all need to do around the world is get out the Betsy Ross flag in a sign of worldwide unity to end the American Revolution against the Brits that we didn't win, and put a stake in the ground and let these globalists know that the people of the world are tired of this. We want a world of peace and of prosperity and of abundance and of free energy. And we are saying no more. So go to rushlimbaugh.com, buy yourself that fine Betsy Ross t-shirt, wear it proudly, and tell the globalists to put it where the sun doesn't shine.